just don't think that the brands that are emerging today are ever going to have 2,000 stores. I don't think that they need to. And I don't think that they want to, because they want to focus on it being like incredibly high touch, experiential, and then sort of like pointing you in the right direction and providing this magical sort of, a keynote experience, and then letting you sort of come back and return and sort of have that journey continue online. I think we talk a lot about this idea of like rent is the new CAC, customer acquisition cost, and this idea that your stores are basically billboards for what the customer experience that you're offering. The most profitable customers that you can have as a retailer are ones that originate offline and then continue to buy online. So I was doing that thing that retailers hate, where I order 6 versions of something, have it all shipped to my house, try it on, and send back what I don't like. But all of those return and shipping costs are like dead weight to these retailers. I went to an experience called Brand Box, which was at Tyson's Corner, where they're helping these sort of young retailers experiment for their first time. I bought this sweater. It's a company called Nadam. We're not an investor in, and I just love it. And so I was able to try it on the store. I didn't buy 4 versions of my size to try to figure it out. But now I know my size, and I'm already plugged into the Nadam system. So when I buy the next one and the next one, they'll have me already set up in their system. So I'm not going to order 4 versions of it. So I think it's this idea of trying to bridge that experience. And so now they've acquired me, but I'm much more inexpensive to maintain online.
So I'm very excited to have the opportunity to chat with Natalie. We were introduced to her. I think a couple of our colleagues, Avery and Jeff, got to see you speak on a panel recently talking about just your sort of thoughts on retail. Then we got on the phone and I realized that she's been a longtime fan of PSK, which is always nice to hear.
And a paying customer.
Oh, amazing.
Should be.
All right. I didn't ask her to say that, but and then also we found out that we have a mutual love of Pee Wee Herman. So this is very kismet opportunity for us to talk. But I will step back for a second and let you introduce yourself, give us a little background on what it is that you're up to, and then we can dive into the conversation.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Natalie Press. I'm a partner at Fifth Wall Ventures, which is a venture capital firm focused on the evolution of technology in what we call the built world. That's a fancy way of saying we are interested in all things related to real estate. So what we did, our 2 co-founders, Brendan Wallace and Brad Garvey, they took real estate and they broke it up into all the different food groups. So retail, commercial, homes, multifamily, basically every category of hospitality. And they basically found the biggest owners and operators in each category to back a venture fund. So for retail, our main backer is Macerich, which you guys may be familiar with as the 3rd largest owner of shopping centers in America, including the most in Class A locations. So Tyson's Corner, Santa Monica Place, Corte Madera if you're from San Francisco, Marriott and Host for hospitality, Lennar, the biggest home builder in America, Hines, the biggest office owner in America. And so the idea is we're making investments in companies, including these digitally native brands, with the concept that we own the 2 billion square feet worth of real estate, that we're going to help them as they sort of continue that omnichannel fantasy into sort of expanding into physical locations. My background was not in real estate at all. I did trend forecasting, I did marketing, and then I worked for a long time in the entertainment industry, helping people like Pee Wee Herman as they sort of made this transition from into being online brands. So, Ben Stiller was one early client, Pee Wee was another one, and sort of like helping them figure out how to harness the internet to accomplish whatever their goals were, whether that was if you were Pee Wee opening your first Broadway show, if you're Sean Penn, we did a lot of work with what he was doing in Haiti to sort of recovery from the earthquake. So we did a lot of work across kind of various segments of entertainment and trying to help them understand this digital innovation and evolution that was happening. And now, in a weird way, I sort of reverse apply that to these kind of big real estate owners and operators and helping them figure out how to innovate the places that we're spending 90% of our time. If that makes sense.
Wonderful. That's great. So as some sort of higher level context, just curious to know specifically as you're thinking about real estate and as it applies to retail, what are some of the bigger shifts that you're seeing happening within the space, and some of the big challenges that you're sort of finding people having, whether it's the real estate owners or the brands themselves that you're working with?
I think from the owner's perspective, they're interested in reinventing, certainly on the retail side, they're interested in reinventing that retail experience. So they are trying to sort of recreate, currently they have all these malls and retail centers that are filled with, maybe a Sears and Macy's, these sort of big boxes, and they're trying to figure out how do we sort of remanifest that space. So they're certainly interested in and are actively investing in the digitally native brands, the Allbirds of the world that are going to be their future sort of huge retailers. They're also, though, interested in just repurposing that space altogether. So we led an investment in Industrious, which is very familiar to, I think, a lot of New Yorkers. In terms of doing co-working, we're seeing now people that are building hotels in retail centers. So it's this idea of what we call space utilization, but it's the same idea of, many of you may be customers of a storage company called Clutter, that they basically come to your house, they take the things that you would be paying astronomically high prices to store in a public storage like 2 blocks down from you. Where you're really paying is sort of the implied cost of the like condo tower that they could be building there. But what Clutter does is they come and they take that stuff, they put it in a warehouse that's far outside the city, and then they can bring it back to you with the call of an app. So it's this idea of, we're not always using the spaces around us most efficiently. So we're trying to help these retail and other real estate owners sort of think through how they can be more efficient, but also make that experience more magical for the consumer in the process.
Yeah, so sort of building on that, I'm curious, is like, what is what's the sort of value proposition that you guys are bringing in terms of helping them understand how better to bring that to use that experience? Is it breaking the stores up? Is it bringing in new brands? Is it implementing technology? What are all the sort of pieces at play there?
It's certainly all of the above. I think for the retail owners, we sort of define it along 3 categories, which is, one is the sort of technology, whether that's smart parking or there's actually one that I read about on PSFK called Hero that helps sort of reallocate your customer service with your physical store employees. So it's this idea of doing retail tech, digitally native brands, the DNVBs, but also these kind of adjacent retail enabled businesses. So this morning I flew in from LA, but I got a blowout at Dry Bar, and I did that in the app on the plane when I landed, before I walked into the city. So this idea of, I can book my nail salon, I can book so many of these physical experiences all using an app, and then have this magical experience when I walk into the store. I think we talk a lot about this idea of rent is the new CAC, customer acquisition cost, and this idea that your stores are basically billboards for what the customer experience that you're offering. I think the most profitable customers that you can have as a retailer are ones that originate offline and then continue to buy online. I personally was the most annoying customer for the past year. I had a baby, and so I was doing that thing that retailers hate, where I order 6 versions of something, have it all shipped to my house, try it on, and send back what I don't like. But all of those return and shipping costs are dead weight to these retailers. But what happens over the holidays was I went to an experience called Brand Box, which is at Tyson's Corner, where they're helping these sort of young retailers experiment for their first time. I bought this sweater. It's a company called Nadam. We're not an investor in it, and I just love it. And so I was able to try it on the store. I didn't buy 4 versions of my size to try to figure it out. But now I know my size, and I'm already plugged into the Nadam system. So when I buy the next one and the next one, they'll have me already set up in their system. So I'm not going to order 4 versions of it. So I think it's this idea of trying to bridge that experience. And so now they've acquired me, but I'm much more inexpensive to maintain online, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's interesting, because it is something we're obviously seeing, is that you have these stores now almost as marketing channels, and then
Absolutely.
Everything else is sort of happening in the background. So maybe is it, for the real estate companies themselves, is it a hard thing for them to sort of wrap their heads around? What is their sort of, you have shorter leases, a different way of sort of reimagining their space, perhaps. What are those conversations, and what are they telling you?
I think, first of all, in choosing who, because we only have one kind of key LP in each category. And so in choosing who those LPs were, I think that those were kind of the hardest conversations, because we didn't necessarily go with the people that had the most money to invest. We actually went with people who we sat down and met with and sort of really were committed to innovation and change management. We actually brought in an entire advisory practice that is designed to sort of help them with this kind of double bottom line. So they're investing and they certainly expect a return on their investment, but they're also like, we're their innovation consultants to a large extent. And so we're talking to them about the ways that millennials and Gen Zs are changing the customer experience. I love the idea of experience shopping from earlier. So it's this idea that we're educating them on where the trends are going and where their customers are going. And then we're helping them to sort of get ahead of those trends before they have a meaningful impact on their business. You see this, especially, it's not retail specific, but you see this in co-working. So Heinz, which is our commercial LP, they have more vacant space in their portfolio than WeWork has in their entire sort of footprint across the country. And so they know that co-working is going to be a huge, huge, huge factor, increasingly percentage of the way that buildings are allocated. And so now they're looking to Fifth Wall to help them sort of figure out, what do we think about co-working? What are the companies that are going to succeed? How can we have sort of beneficial relationships with those? It's the same thing in every single category, whether that's hotels and this idea of sort of like micro rooms that you rent for much shorter increments than overnight. It's all this idea of we're just repurposing space. And I think we're tying into consumer behavior in a really unique way, because we're basically telling them this is the experience that they want. This is the experience that they expect. Back to this first step that we heard this morning, like they expect people to be able to change in a really, really rapid, really quick way. And they expect the owners, they're not talking about the people that are, from a B2B perspective, they're not talking about them as tenants anymore. They're really considering them customers. And I think for real estate, especially, that's such a huge shift. It's the largest asset class on earth, real estate, but they haven't been thinking about these people as customers. And I think they're pulling a little bit of that sort of like retail customer service, meeting customer expectations and exceeding it. They're pulling that through across all of this.
So you talked a little bit about the sort of technology side of things. I'm curious how you see that sort of manifesting within the context of that sort of physical retail experience, and maybe how does that? Is there something about the way that spaces are now being created or retrofitted, let's say, that needs to change, or is it all going to just be happening on digital, your phone, or whatever the case is?
I think we're certainly seeing it in the way that spaces are changed, because I think that this idea of showrooming is something that we're seeing brands really respond to, which is the sort of endless aisle. You may only have one of each thing in the store, but it's able to draw you in because it's created an experience. I don't understand why every sort of children's and baby clothing brand doesn't also offer a woman with a parachute doing baby classes, because it gets me as a customer into the store, and I'm much more likely to make a higher revenue purchase when I'm doing it in store versus online, because online you sort of go in kind of knowing I want this pair of boots or whatever, and in store you sort of have the ability to sample all across. I think we're also seeing a lot of sort of cohabitation. You saw this in the very early days with even like J. Crew, where they sort of would put the J. Crew and all of the different sort of things you could buy at the cash register. And now we're seeing entire stores that are created around this concept of pulling in various cohorts of these digitally native brands. I think Neighborhood Goods is a great example of this, where they're actually sort of pulling in, and it's almost like a mini department store for those brands. We talk a lot about the concept of retail as a service, which is basically, if you're a digitally native brand, you might be really good at acquiring customers online, but you go to physical retail and it is an entirely different set of muscles. So you need to navigate negotiating a lease. What are your four-wall economics? How do you stock your inventory? How do you hire people in all of these cities? So it's a totally different set of considerations that most of these people that created an incredibly great product and are really good at marketing and retargeting that product online have no experience in. And that's where we see the opportunity for a firm like Fifth Wall, because a lot of venture capitalists can give you money, but not a lot of them can say like, oh, not only are we investors, but we've negotiated leases before and we understand and we can help you sort of as you go from 10 stores to 50 stores. Untuckit is a great example. We invested in them a couple of years ago, and now that they've gone from 10 stores to 50 stores. 10 of those 50 are actually within Macerich properties. So you have this ability to, when you find a partner, whether it's Macerich or any other sort of like bigger picture retailer, you have this ability to scale much faster if you're one of these brands. And also, when you think about like negotiating a lease and sort of street retail, which I love shopping on Abbot Kinney as much as the rest of them, which is the big sort of consumer street in Venice where Fifth Wall is located. But you don't have this relationship with your landlord. You just write them a check every month. The ability of all the things that we're talking about here today, especially data and analytics, to sort of be informed when you're in a place where you have a landlord that actually cares and is interested in knowing, like, the types of people that are walking up and down the sort of mall hall is very different than the ability that you have to track somebody walking in the street. And so this ability that I think if you put smart landlords into the picture, that they have to sort of help you co-create that customer experience rather than you know everything about your customers if you're a digitally native brand. And then you go into physical retail and they can't tell you who's walking in and out of your store. Like there needs to be a bridge. And so we're trying to help be that connective tissue, if that makes sense.
That's really cool. I mean, I like that idea of, I mean, that sort of operating system, retail as a service sort of idea has come up already a couple times this morning. And so you have this sort of like intelligence behind the scenes, and that can be that sort of data layer, but it also can be these other sort of related services and things like that. So
what I'm also excited for is when the brands actually share that data themselves. You know what I mean? Like it feels like Sweet Green and Heyday and all of these really cool digitally native consumer brands that have those cool experiences, they're all like targeting the same customers. So when that data is shared, like when all the kiosks are talking to each other as I go through the airport, like that's where the magic to me is.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, that sort of data piece is so critical and interesting. And like you said, it's like that everyone's sort of sitting on their own little gold mines, but then once you have those relationships together, that becomes really interesting. Question, I haven't really had to look at this, which is nice. So I'm curious, you know, beyond sort of retail, you guys are also looking at some of the bigger opportunities that are happening. You did a little sort of forecast of things that you're tracking. So maybe we can close out with some of the big things that you're sort of looking at ahead in 2019, whether that's retail specific or some of the other things.
The number one thing is a super foodie that is only ordered online for the past 6 months. We're really excited about cloud kitchens, which you guys may have been reading about. Ghost kitchens, cloud kitchen. There's a lot of different names for different facets of the business, but it's this idea that the LA example that I give is Sugarfish, which is, I know has a couple locations here, but it's just really great sushi at an affordable price by one of the sort of sushi masters. They had too much demand for their delivery service. So they basically like posted up in a warehouse and they created a thing that is just a factory. There's no front of house. And that it's just a delivery operation. So we're seeing that, but now we're going to start to see this really interesting layer of restaurants that exist entirely in the Postmates and Uber Eats and other apps. So all of our chef friends out there are really excited to get on board with this trend. We invested in Heyday last year, which is an incredible facial that you book online that's big here in New York. But this idea of boutique wellness, I'm not going to the spa anymore. I'm going to sort of individual brands for that. And then we're also seeing this idea of, we're looking at all of the retail as a service platforms to figure out which one of those is going to make the most sense. It'll probably be a few bets for us. And then I think this idea of like health and wellness as a category. There's a really interesting company that's just starting to open physical locations called Candid. There's a company that I'm personally trying to find called Lashify, which is if you're a female and you've ever tried to get put on like fake lashes for yourself for like an event, it's the most painful and awkward experience. This company sells lashes that you can sort of like attach for a couple of days. I'm not wearing anything right now, obviously. I just got off the plane. But this idea of like they should be having kiosks in malls so that you can, if you buy the product online, have somebody spend 4 minutes that is a professional doing this all day rather than what I tried to do last night before I left Los Angeles, which was like fiddle in the mirror and it didn't obviously work out. But this idea of things that you know, they're kits that you order online that would be so much easier to accomplish if you had somebody to help you. So Candid is a teeth straightening product that you order online and you do like a fitting and you kind of measure yourself, but it's infinitely easier and creates so much less user error and customer service problems for them when they have people that are able to sort of fit you in store. So this idea of like all of those wellness and health concepts, that it is much dramatically shifting their business when they're doing things.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, there's a couple of things that you touched on that I think is super interesting, is like this hyper niche sort of like specialization, and the fact that if you can sort of acquire all these customers digitally and they're aware of your brand, then you don't have to have this like massive footprint, but you just need to be able to like service them and they need to be able to find you. And then just that sort of like customer experience around healthcare, which I think is super cool.
I think it's super cool. And I just don't think that the brands that are emerging today are ever going to have 2,000 stores. I don't think that they need to. And I don't think that they want to, because they want to focus on it being like incredibly high touch, experiential, and then sort of like pointing you in the right direction and providing this magical sort of, a keynote experience, and then letting you sort of come back and return and sort of have that journey continue online. But still, every time, I walk by a dry bar, it's a reminder that like, oh, I'm doing this PSFK thing. I should book my next. So it all just sort of does feed in if you think about the customer cycle. But I think that's why you need bricks and mortar to actually manifest that.
Wonderful. All right. Well, that is our conversation. If you can help me thank Natalie, that would be wonderful.